Hi, I'm Kathy Bisbee, Executive Director at CMAP, and I'm here today to talk about the new California High-Speed Rail project. A very exciting topic, one that I heard a little bit about at the Gilroy Rotary Club recently, and I've invited the California High-Speed Rail Authority Northern Regional Project Manager, Director, Ben Tripousis. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I was so impressed by your presentation at the Gilroy Rotary Club. It was a lot of information I hadn't heard about the California High-Speed Rail project. It's something I voted for. I know I read the voter manual and it seemed like a good idea, but to be honest, I was a little curious about how are we going to really do this? This seems like such a big project of so much importance for both Gilroy and for California. Tell us a little bit about the support that you have moving forward on this project and why it's so essential.
Well, it is a very exciting project, and it really is our opportunity to invest in the future of California. And the project itself, the Northern California region, just by way of reference, extends from the Transbay Terminal in downtown San Francisco, south here to Gilroy, east to the city of Merced, and then north to the city of Sacramento. Those are the portions that we're responsible for planning and delivering. The project then extends from the city of Merced south to Bakersfield, and then further south to the LA Basin, to Palmdale, Burbank, ultimately Los Angeles and Anaheim. That's phase one, roughly 520 miles of the system. And once that's completed, we'll be then extending the system from Merced to the city of Sacramento, and then from LA Union Station to San Diego, making the entire statewide system 800 miles, which is roughly akin to any other high-speed system anywhere in the world. The goal in terms of investing in high-speed rail and making it part of our transportation toolbox in California is that we've really maxed out our other sources, roadways and airports, and even our existing regional railways. We have 3 of the top 5 busiest Amtrak routes in the country here in California.
Wow.
And many people don't know that, but clearly congestion continues to be an issue, and Californians are trying to find another way to move around the state. We have 6 of the top 30 most congested corridors in the United States here in California, really pushing us to find ways around moving both goods and people around the state. California is going to continue to grow. We're expected to add the population of the state of New York to California over the next 20 to 30 years.
What is that number? What is the population of New York? I mean, you think with New York City, it's gotta be
It's
huge.
roughly another 20 million people into California.
Wow.
So we're well over 50 million people in the next 20 to 30 years in California.
Yep.
And that will make a very congested state even more congested and make it more challenging, certainly in the urban areas, to move around and to really allow not just residents to move around, but really to allow business to do business. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group, for example, recently did a survey of their CEOs, 400 of the largest companies in the Bay Area. And every one of those CEOs said that traffic congestion was among the top 5 problems faced by their businesses in order to remain economically viable. So, trying to address congestion, trying to improve mobility, and while we're investing in high-speed rail in this instance, it really is more about a statewide rail modernization program, because we're also partnering with the Capital Corridor to Sacramento, with the Altamont Corridor Express, with the San Joaquin Regional Rails, with Metro in Los Angeles, and working with them to improve their systems and expand their capacity and allow them to serve as even more effective feeder services to future high-speed rail.
So it's not just a LA to San Francisco round trip kind of rail system. We're talking about really improving the rail systems that are existing already.
That's exactly right. And from an economic standpoint, really creating an opportunity that we've never had before to connect the Central Valley and their residents to the economic centers, both north and south, that they've been disconnected from for decades. The Central Valley, we're often asked, why are you starting construction in the Central Valley, for example? The Central Valley, if it was a state, it would be the 12th largest state in the country.
Wow.
It would also be the poorest and have among the worst air quality in the country. So trying to improve air quality certainly, and transportation resources and connections in a timely fashion to the Central Valley is critical to their future economic well-being.
I think it's a really interesting point that you just brought up, because I think in the minds of, at least in my mind, and this may be true for lots of other folks, that it really was a San Francisco to LA and back thing when we thought about the project as voters. But what's so clear to me is that, you know, bringing east to west is also part of this rail system and part of really economic development. So people may have seen it just as a transportation project, but really what you're talking about is statewide, east to west, north to south economic development and opportunity.
That's exactly right. And it's really about investing in the future of California. Part of the reason that we are the 8th largest economy in the world is because we've made the kind of investments that have allowed us to grow into the state that we are. That we've built California economically, and whether it's the state highway system or the state water system that were built generations before us, our parents and grandparents did a good job of laying that groundwork for us. And now it's our turn. It's time to build that next generation of projects, and high-speed rail is absolutely one of those projects that will take us into the next 100 and 150 years and address the certainly travel issues, the transportation issues that we'll be facing.
I hope that it becomes more culturally part of our infrastructure as well. Because I noticed, I was just in Europe this year, and in Spain we could take the high-speed rail everywhere. Yeah. In 45 minutes we could travel, you know, 5 hours or 4 hours, I think, that would take you normally by car. And people just jumped on trains and went places for the weekend. And I think, gosh, you know, that kind of economic opportunity just in tourism alone seems like it would drive a lot of really good development for our state.
And that's true, and it's really heartbreaking. If you've ever had an opportunity to get on the Transbay Joint Powers Authority's website, and the Transbay Joint Powers Authority are the folks who are responsible for rebuilding the Transbay Terminal in downtown San Francisco, which is currently under construction and is really one of the first high-speed rail projects in California, along with the electrification of the Caltrain corridor from San Francisco down to San Jose. And on the Transbay website, there's a short video that talks about the history of the Transbay Terminal. And the narrator talks about how before World War II, over 24 million people went through the Transbay Terminal on rail. Back in the days when there used to be the old key rail system on the bottom deck of the Bay Bridge, and regional rail was really the order of the day in terms of mobility around the Bay Area. After World War II, the car became king. We tore out all the tracks, paved them all over, and now we're trying to rebuild many of those railways at hundreds of times the cost. So we had the opportunity to be like Europe, to be like Asia, to have that rail ethic, and we chose another path. Happily, we're on our way back to that path. One of the challenges in constructing a system like high-speed rail now is that we're working to develop a cutting-edge 21st century transportation system that's 50 years old every place else. So we're trying to take the best lessons from the Shinkansen in Japan, and from the TGV in France, and from the ICE system in Spain, and pull all those elements together and put together a cutting-edge high-speed rail system for California.
That's really exciting. I think it's going to be amazing. And you know, tell me, what are people thinking about this plan, and how's it going right now?
Well, it's going very well. On the positive side, we're under construction. We're often asked, is this really going to happen? Is this still going on? And yes, it absolutely is. And we're under construction. Dirt is flying in the Central Valley. The first 29-mile section from Madera to Fresno is under construction, and we're underway. And we're working on planning those other sections that I mentioned, especially from San Francisco here to Gilroy, and from Palmdale down to Burbank. So those project segments are beginning to move forward, largely through the advent of cap and trade funds, which were recently approved by the governor and the legislature. So that now steady source of funding, that steady stream of funding, is allowing us to accelerate the project, which in turn will allow us to deliver it much more quickly at a greatly reduced cost. That's certainly our expectation. So it's a very exciting time. And as I said, we're working to develop, both in partnership with the Transbay Joint Powers Authority to complete the Transbay Terminal, and working with the Caltrain Joint Powers Board on fully electrifying the Caltrain corridor, which is now a diesel train corridor, and convert that to electric, which will be the first step in the evolution of the corridor to high-speed service, where we'll have commuter trains and high-speed trains operating in the same corridor. We'll be using the same tracks. And part of that has come from working with local communities and getting a better idea of what their interests are, what their concerns are, what they'd be most comfortable with in terms of developing a system like this, because it is very hard to develop what is a very large system, a high-speed system like this, and retrofitting it into an already very built-out urban area. It's the size 12 foot into the size 9 shoe, as I often say. But we've had great success working with local communities and getting beyond the initial reaction where high-speed rail, writ broadly, is hugely popular.
Right.
High-speed rail in your backyard, not so much. So we've tried to take a lot of the lack of understanding or the fear and concerns about potential impacts from a system like this and work with those local communities to ensure that the cities that we go through in our station cities like Millbrae and San Francisco and San Jose and Gilroy have a system that is really an asset and not an eyesore.
So what are you doing here locally? There's two questions that I knew you were going to get asked at Rotary as soon as you finished your presentation, which is, how soon will the station appear in Gilroy, and what's really the sort of all of the phases? Can you kind of walk us through what those phases are and what that timeline looks like?
Sure. Happily, as I mentioned, because at least in part of the cap and trade investment, our schedule is beginning to move forward a little bit from what it had been originally identified as, but our current expectation is that we're starting to work on planning the project section from San Francisco to Gilroy and moving that forward for environmental clearance for high-speed service and get that completed roughly in the 2017, early 2018 timeframe. That will then allow us to move toward construction, so we're improving the corridor. And because it's going to be a joint use corridor where both commute and high-speed trains will be operating, we'll look at improvements to grade separations and in areas where we can locate passing tracks to move the trains more effectively, looking at station improvements so both systems can utilize those stations, any track improvements that might be necessary, but to look to complete those in the 2022-23 timeframe and really begin revenue service in the corridor by that time. So optimistically, and I like to be an optimist, that we'll get revenue service for high-speed train, which in this corridor would operate at 110 miles an hour, by that 2022-2023 timeframe. Here in the city of Gilroy, we've partnered with the city of Gilroy to help them master plan their station area. They're currently in the midst of completing their general plan, their 20-year general plan. And a component of that is going to be developing what that downtown station will look like. The city has chosen to locate their station in downtown. There's another alternative that would consider a station east of downtown, but the city's preference at the moment, and I think our overall preference, just because we are oriented toward a point-to-point, downtown-to-downtown, city-to-city travel service, that we've invested $600,000 in partnership with the city. The Valley Transportation Authority has also invested $150,000, and the city itself has invested some funds in that planning process and working with us to develop that plan. And so out of that planning effort will emerge what the ultimate station location will be, and we'll make that a component of our future environmental clearance.
And I'm assuming there's going to be a public process around that so that members of the public can give their 2 cents. We always like to tell people how to get involved and to get active in their community around that. I'm assuming we want some public feedback to make sure this is the right location for the community.
We'd like to get more along the lines of their 10 cents rather than their 2 cents.
Good.
It's our expectation that we will have a very detailed public process, what I like to refer to as blue dot exercises, where we'll go out initially and just have a conversation with the community, that it will be separate from the environmental clearance process where you're often compelled to make a decision, you're on a timeline, we have to have a result by a certain fixed date in order to move the program along. The initial conversations we'd like to have are ones where we're just getting people's ideas and they're sense about what works, what doesn't work, how do we assimilate a project of this size into the local community in a way that works for the local community, and that's really our goal. So we'll be hopefully beginning that process in the middle of next year and virtually go to every community between San Francisco and here in Gilroy and have those very far-reaching, wide-ranging conversations.
That's quite extensive community outreach.
It is, but
to be applauded for doing that kind of work.
Well,
I think
thank you
that's
for
great.
that.
Yeah.
But we have learned lessons from developing the project as we've gone, and more communication in most every case, but certainly in this case, is better than less.
Yeah.
And we need to give people information to be able to make informed decisions and to ensure that their concerns are being addressed, and they're all very significant concerns, and while we may not have the answers to everything, we have the answers to some things, and we need to tell people what we know. And we want to take those opportunities to tell them what we know, to learn what they think, and to give them the opportunity to really see what they've said in the process of our project development, so that whatever we're putting together as a final product for the high-speed rail project reflects the input that we've gotten from the community.
Absolutely. So is the Central Coast going to be linked at all to any of these rail systems? I know for some of us, myself and our staff, some of our staff members live over in Santa Cruz, and of course are driving the 17 or the 152, which can be difficult. Are there any plans in the future to link any of the coasts to Gilroy?
I'm glad you've asked that, because that's what makes Gilroy and the downtown station in Gilroy so important. Because the cities of Hollister, for example, Salinas, Monterey, Santa Cruz have all expressed an interest in getting a rail connection to Gilroy and to the Bay Area corridor. The Capital Corridor line that currently extends from Sacramento to the Bay Area, to San Jose in particular, has been talking about extending their system to Salinas and Monterey. The Altamont Corridor Express has talked about extending their system to Sacramento and Modesto and Merced. So those regional rail systems that I referred to earlier and the partnerships that we're engaging in and helping them build up their systems are really the linchpin around providing better service to cities like Hollister and Point South. Those regional systems, and as they improve and expand their systems and capacity, will be able to connect to high-speed rail at the multimodal station here in Gilroy and allow those folks to have a meaningful connection to the statewide system. And for us, it really is about enhancing those multimodal connections and station connections so that people can take transit to transit, so that we really address that last mile connection to the high-speed system to make it a much more attractive trip, a much easier trip, one that would become reflexive for people to take, rather than saying, you know, I need to go to LA, I don't want to spend 4 hours for a 1 hour trip, I can just catch the high-speed train in Gilroy and be there in 2 hours.
I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about making a trip to LA, and I thought, gosh, if the high-speed rail was in place, I could just jump on there for the weekend as opposed to driving 5 hours, or like you said, going to the airport for 2 hours, you know, getting there an hour in advance and driving there in traffic. You're really looking at the same time that it takes to drive there at that point. And that's also, you were saying, that's a very difficult airport, one of the most congested airport hubs in San Francisco and LA as well,
It is.
Right?
In fact, we have among the most congested short-haul airline corridors in the country. That the number of flights from Bay Area airports, a significant number of flights from Bay Area airports, all fly to Southern California, LAX, Ontario, Burbank, San Diego. So as we've seen in other parts of the world, and on the East Coast in the Acela corridor between New York and Boston and New York and Washington, the minute a higher speed or high speed rail system is introduced, the demand for air travel goes down significantly, because all of those folks that had been taking a plane flight are now getting on those trains and making a much easier trip and transfer between those cities.
And it's not really hurting the airlines any, because they're just reprioritizing according to the market.
It allows them to change their business model. What had been a short haul trip to LAX or Ontario now becomes a long haul trip to Chicago or Boston or Philadelphia, because the air route has been freed up. And in many cases, between Paris and London, for example, once the tunnel rather began operation, the number of flights between those two cities almost evaporated completely, because most folks are taking the train. It's a much easier trip for them, and those airlines reprioritize their flights to other parts of Europe.
Wow, that's really exciting. And one of the things, I have a friend who commutes from Oakland up to Sacramento 4 days a week. And I'm so envious that he can just kind of sit and type on his computer and get some work in, make some phone calls, and then arrive at his destination. So the reality for us is that's going to happen for Gilroy and Hollister. We could work in Silicon Valley, work in Gilroy, take the train, and it's going to be affordable as well. What's your estimate on costs from the San Francisco to LA route, for example?
The authority's commitment is that the trips between city pairs are roughly 80% of the comparable airline fare. So a trip between San Francisco and Los Angeles that's $100 would be roughly $80 on high-speed rail. Now, having said that, the system will be operated by a concessionaire, and they'll have some parameters for modifying their fares up and down, but there are certainly plenty of international examples that show how to maximize both ridership and fare box recovery between city pairs. And what our studies have shown is that we'll actually have higher volumes on the shorter trips between cities, so that you'll see higher volumes of passengers from LA to Fresno, or from Fresno to Bakersfield, or Bakersfield to Sacramento, or Merced to the Bay Area, than you will necessarily see San Francisco to Los Angeles. You'll see high volumes there as well, but those short trips become much more attractive for folks. And it strikes you in the most interesting ways. I had a chance to go to the San Jose State Spartans, Fresno State Bulldogs football game at the end of football season last year, and at the end of the game there were 9,000 Fresno State fans in the stands, and it just struck me, if the train was in place, those folks wouldn't be confronted by a 3-hour drive, they'd have a 1-hour train trip.
That's a great example. I think what your presentation and even just the information you provided today has been really helpful to me, is to see not only that there's broad support and that this plan that you have to make this happen, which seems huge. I'm so impressed that you've taken this on, you and your team, and I'm very proud of us as a state that we took that risk, because it did seem a little, God, how are we going to do this? And it seems like there's a great plan in place, and there's really evidence that makes it clear how valuable that this infrastructure will be, both economically, for families, for tourists. I imagine that some level of tourists and travelers are going to be really using this, even from other countries, to come and travel around California.
My daughter is counting on that day trip to Disneyland. She wants to know, Dad, when are you delivering that trip for me?
Absolutely.
But you're absolutely right, Kathy. And California has a history, really a legacy of investing in projects that have helped build our future. We built the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge during the deepest, darkest depression in our history. The UC system, the CSU system, the State Water Project are all investments that have allowed us to become the 8th largest economy in the world. And we believe that high-speed rail, as I mentioned earlier, is the next generation in those investments, and will allow us to continue to grow, and will allow us to partner with other projects and other entities like our regional rail partners to improve mobility in California into the future, and really keep California the leader in not just the United States but the world.
Well, we just have a few more minutes left. It seems like it hasn't been very long at all, but we've actually filled up our whole show. So I want to give you an opportunity just to recap, and if there's anything that you want to leave our viewers with about the project and your involvement. And it sounds like we might be seeing you a little bit in Gilroy. What would you like to say?
Well, I certainly hope so. The point to be made really is that high-speed rail is on its way and under construction. We are moving dirt. We are developing the project in the first construction section in the Central Valley, and making important strides toward improving transportation in California, and making investments beyond high-speed rail. As I mentioned, that it's not just about high-speed rail. We'll have an electrified Caltrain system. We'll have a brand new Grand Central Station West in downtown San Francisco that the system will connect to, moving travelers up and down California. And it's an amazing project to be a part of. I'm very happy to be part of a legacy project. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to help deliver a project like this to California. And the fundamental reality is that we can't do it without you and your viewers and the people of California working with us to ensure that we deliver the absolute best project possible for the future of California.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been wonderful to hear again about this project and to get some new information as well. And we hope that you'll come back.
I will, absolutely.
And maybe we could do a community forum here where we had members of the community, stakeholders come in and talk about their concerns and their excitement about the project, and you can facilitate that or be a part of that conversation as well.
That would be fabulous. I'd look forward to that, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to just say goodbye to our viewers. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Depth of Field. We're really excited to have Ben on the show to talk to us about the California High-Speed Rail Project. I'm very excited about the project. But I'm also very excited because I'm starting a new chapter of my life, and I want to use this opportunity to very quickly say so long and farewell, and thank you so much for watching Depth of Field over the last 6 years that we've been producing it here at CMAP. I will no longer be at CMAP as of October 4th, but I'll be watching CMAP on cmap.tv. I hope you will too. Thanks so much and have a great day.